In the 3rd century AD, night does not end Rome, it edits it. Roads stay awake, stones loyal, movement reduced to habit. Nothing conquers here. Maintenance replaces glory, wheels murmur, messengers pass, and the empire survives through boredom, continuing quietly. Before you drift any deeper, if this quiet helps you feel safe tonight, you're welcome to stay with us. Subscribing softly keeps this place gentle and lets these, now, rest. The architecture of continuity. Roman roads are not paths in the casual sense of the word, not suggestions offered to the landscape, not lines drawn with optimism and revised with regret. They are decisions made permanent, arguments settled in stone, intentions pressed downward until the ground itself agrees. Each layer is placed with patience rather than flair, gravel crushed until it loses individuality, stone fitted so tightly that even sound learns to behave. Elegance is unnecessary here. Endurance is sufficient, and sufficiency is the highest ambition of a system that plans to outlive the people using it. By the 3rd century AD, the empire is still wide, impressively wide, but it is no longer energetic in the way youth imagines itself to be. Expansion has slowed to a thoughtful shuffle. Borders do not surge outward so much as they hesitate, reconsider, and decide to stay where they are for another generation. What matters now is not acquiring more land, but managing what already exists without losing patience. Roads become less about arrival and more about reassurance. They exist to make distance tolerable, to flatten geography into something that can be scheduled, measured, and endured without enthusiasm. A Roman road does not inspire awe when examined closely. It inspires acceptance. Mile after mile, it repeats itself with a confidence that borders on indifference. This is not repetition born of laziness, but repetition born of success. When something works well enough, improvement becomes a risk rather than a goal. The road does not ask where you are going. It assumes you will continue, because continuation is its primary offering. In this sense, the road is more philosophical than practical, though it would never describe itself that way. At night, this philosophy becomes easier to hear. Without the noise of crowds and commerce, the stones cool, and the dust settles into the gaps between them like an old habit resuming its place. The road stops pretending to be impressive and becomes honest. Its true purpose reveals itself not as glory but as reliability. It is not here to celebrate victories or frame processions. It is here to accept pressure repeatedly without complaint. No speeches are delivered to the road, and the road delivers none in return. It simply absorbs weight and returns stability. The architecture itself reflects this mindset. The foundation sinks deep, layered deliberately, each stratum reinforcing the next. Drainage channels are hidden, modest, efficient, ensuring that rain does not linger long enough to cause inconvenience. Curves are avoided not out of aesthetic stubbornness, but because straight lines save time, and saving time is the closest thing the empire has to mercy. Where hills intrude, the road cuts through them. Where valleys appear, the road bridges them. The landscape is not consulted. It is instructed. Yet there is something quietly humorous in this confidence. The road believes sincerely that the future will cooperate. It assumes maintenance will continue forever, that stones will be replaced as they wear, that labor will remain available, that authority will persist long enough to justify such effort. This optimism is not naive. It is administrative. It is the kind of optimism that does not hope for happiness, but for functionality, which is far more realistic. By the 3rd century, those who travel these roads rarely marvel at them. Familiarity has replaced admiration. The stones are noticed only when they fail, which they do infrequently enough to maintain their reputation. The road becomes background, and background is where systems prefer to operate. When something becomes invisible, it has succeeded at becoming indispensable. Night reinforces this invisibility. Without daylight to highlight craftsmanship, the road becomes texture rather than structure. Feet and wheels move across it with minimal ceremony. Travelers adjust their pace instinctively, trusting the surface beneath them without reflection. Trust, after all, is easiest when it is unexamined. The road rewards this trust by behaving exactly as expected. There is no drama in this interaction. The road does not react differently to different travelers. It does not acknowledge rank, urgency, or intention. A courier moves no more gently than a merchant, and a soldier leaves no deeper impression than a farmer transporting tools. The road equalizes by indifference. Everything that moves across it becomes briefly important, then immediately forgettable. This is why the road feels most Roman at night. Stripped of spectacle, it reveals the empire's preferred state, quiet function. The empire does not need to announce itself every hour. It needs to continue. Roads make that continuation possible by refusing to participate in excitement. They are designed to outlast emotion, ambition, and even confidence. In the silence, one can almost sense the calculations embedded in the stone. Distances measured, loads estimated, wear anticipated. Every decision made with the expectation of repetition. The road is prepared to be used again tomorrow, and the day after, and the year after that. It does not care who uses it, only that they do so predictably. The mild irony is that this very predictability eventually allows the road to survive beyond the system that created it. When authority weakens and maintenance becomes inconsistent, the road often remains passable anyway, coasting on the excess strength built into it during more confident centuries. It turns out that boredom, when engineered properly, is remarkably durable. So at night, when the stones release the day's heat and the air grows still, the road rests without sleeping. It holds its shape, keeps its alignment, and waits. Not expectantly, but patiently. It knows movement will return. It always does. The night messenger. The courier travels when others rest, not because darkness grants him mystery or courage, but because time is expensive and sleep, however respectable, produces no movement. In the 3rd century AD, urgency is rarely emotional. It is administrative. Orders do not tremble. They wait. And waiting too long is considered wasteful, which in Roman logic is a quiet sin that does not require forgiveness, only correction. Within the imperial system known as the cursus publicus, speed is not measured in excitement, danger, or daring, but in hours quietly removed from the journey. Horses are exchanged with minimal ceremony. Tablets are sealed with practiced indifference. Instructions move faster than rumors because rumors enjoy lingering, while instructions are expected to arrive and then stop existing. The courier is merely the medium through which impatience becomes efficient. At night, the messenger hears less. and therefore notices more. The markets have gone silent. The roadside arguments have dissolved into sleep. What remains is rhythm, hooves striking stone with consistent reluctance, leather creaking, breath synchronizing with distance. The road stripped of distractions reveals itself as a narrow agreement between effort and progress. In this reduced world, attention sharpens not out of alertness, but out of absence. The courier does not wonder what the message contains. Curiosity is inefficient, and inefficiency invites delay. His task is simple: keep moving, arrive intact, deliver without commentary. Thought is reserved for later, preferably for someone else. He exists to compress distance, not to interpret meaning. In this sense, he is less a person than a function wearing boots. He rides with the understanding that nothing remarkable should happen. Remarkable events cause paperwork, and paperwork slows systems that pride themselves on quiet flow. His route is predetermined. His stops are assigned. Even his fatigue is anticipated and managed. When he dismounts, it is not to reflect, but to exchange horses, drink water, and continue without gratitude. Gratitude, like curiosity, has no measurable effect on arrival time. The night reshapes him subtly. Without witnesses, his posture loosens. Without crowds, his importance diminishes to something manageable. He is no longer visible authority, only moving necessity. The road does not respond to rank, and the darkness enforces this equality with impressive consistency. Even imperial business becomes anonymous under stars that do not acknowledge jurisdiction. There is mild irony in this arrangement. Messages that may alter appointments, redirect resources, or inconvenience entire provinces are carried by someone who is encouraged to care as little as possible. Emotional detachment is not a flaw here. It is a design feature. The courier's neutrality protects the message from becoming a story before it reaches its destination. The soundscape accompanies him patiently, wind across open ground, an owl uninterested in politics, the dull certainty of stone beneath hooves. These sounds do not inspire reflection, they regulate pace. Night becomes a tool, removing excess stimuli so movement can proceed without hesitation. Daytime invites distraction. Night enforces compliance. Rest stations appear like punctuation rather than destinations. Brief pauses, predictable routines. The courier is fed not for pleasure but for continuity. Sleep is shallow and measured, just enough to reset muscles without encouraging dreams. Dreams waste energy and sometimes suggest alternatives. The system discourages both. He understands instinctively that his value lies in invisibility. If everything works correctly, no one will remember him. The message will be discussed. The consequences will unfold. His name will dissolve back into the road that carried him. This is success. Recognition would imply disruption, and disruption suggests inefficiency. There is gentle humor in the seriousness with which this unremarkable task is treated. The empire mobilizes resources, infrastructure, and policy to ensure that one person can travel quietly through the night without stopping unnecessarily. It is an impressive investment in something intentionally dull. Rome, at this stage, has learned that boredom, when organized properly, is far more powerful than excitement. As the night deepens, fatigue does not announce itself loudly. It settles gradually like dust on stone. The courier adjusts, he shortens his stride, he listens to the horse, he trusts the road. Trust replaces alertness. not because danger has vanished, but because predictability has proven reliable enough to allow partial inattention. The system depends on this balance. Too much awareness slows movement. Too little risks failure. He passes others occasionally, a cart moving earlier than expected, a guard shifting position. No greetings are exchanged. Speech is optional and therefore avoided. Words, after all, require acknowledgement, and acknowledgement costs time. Silence is the most efficient language available. By the time dawn approaches, the courier has already completed most of his work. The night, which others consider an interruption, has been his most productive ally. He arrives before activity resumes, before questions emerge, before explanations are requested. The message changes hands. Responsibility transfers. The courier fades from relevance with professional satisfaction. In the end, the night messenger embodies a particular Roman confidence, the belief that systems should function best when no one is watching. That authority is strongest when it moves quietly. That speed achieved without spectacle is the most sustainable kind. He does not shape history dramatically. He ensures it continues without noticing him. Waystations and measured rest. Along the Roman road stand waystations placed at intervals that reflect calculation rather than kindness, distances measured not by comfort but by endurance, by how long a horse can continue before its efficiency declines, and how far a body can move before it begins to negotiate with fatigue. These stations are not accidents of hospitality. They are planned pauses, inserted into the landscape with the same deliberate indifference that defines the road itself. Their presence is not meant to welcome, only to prevent failure. In the 3rd century AD, these waystations function as components within a system that has little patience for romance. Known formally as the mantio, they exist to support motion, not to interrupt it. A roof is provided because animals deteriorate faster when exposed. Water is available because dehydration delays schedules. Walls stand not to create comfort but to stabilize routine. Every element is justified by efficiency rather than generosity, and this justification is never explained because explanation would imply debate. Arrival at a way station produces no sense of achievement. It is not a destination, merely a sanctioned pause. Travelers do not enter with relief so much as compliance. They know what is expected. Dismount. Exchange animals if authorized. Drink. Eat what is offered. Rest briefly. Continue. The building itself discourages lingering. Corners are sharp. Spaces are shared. Privacy is minimal and therefore unrequested. Nothing here invites attachment. Sleep in these places is shallow by design. Shared rooms collect familiar smells that have long since lost their individuality. Leather, dust, old smoke, damp stone. No one arranges bedding with care because care suggests permanence. The body is allowed to rest only enough to reset its usefulness. Dreams are accidental. If they occur, they are short and easily forgotten, which is ideal. Conversation remains practical and limited. No one tells stories worth remembering. Not because people lack experiences, but because the environment does not reward reflection. Stories slow departure. Silence, on the other hand, preserves momentum. By design, nothing interrupts the idea that tomorrow is merely an extension of today with slightly altered lighting. The Roman state understands rest only as preparation for further movement. Rest is not valued for its own sake. It is measured, regulated and justified by what follows it. To rest too deeply would risk satisfaction, and satisfaction encourages questions. Questions interfere with schedules. Therefore, rest remains functional, thin, and carefully bounded. There is mild irony in the seriousness with which this unremarkable pause is engineered. Consider the effort required to ensure that people do not stop for too long. Buildings constructed, staff assigned, supplies monitored, all to guarantee that stopping does not become staying. Rome invests heavily in preventing comfort from becoming persuasive. At night, the waystation reveals its true character. Without daytime activity, it becomes almost invisible, a dark shape pressed against the road, performing its duty quietly. Lanterns burn low, voices drop further. The building does not sleep, but it does rest, like an animal trained to remain alert without moving. It holds travelers briefly, then releases them without ceremony. Those who work here understand their role instinctively. They do not offer opinions. They do not ask questions. They maintain order by maintaining predictability. Their labor is repetitive and therefore reliable. Familiarity replaces enthusiasm. Pride, if it exists at all, comes from smooth transitions rather than memorable interactions. There is a quiet humor in the contrast between imperial ambition and these modest spaces. Rome governs continents, yet depends on rooms where nothing interesting happens. The empire's power rests not only in armies and decrees, but in the disciplined dullness of places designed to erase individuality temporarily. This is not weakness. It is strategy refined to its least theatrical form. Travelers notice the waystation most clearly when it fails to appear on time. When distance stretches too far without relief, frustration emerges. When the station appears exactly where expected, it is barely acknowledged. Predictability, once achieved, becomes invisible. The system works best when it goes unnoticed. Morning does not transform the waystation. It merely resumes function at a different volume. Animals are prepared. Equipment is checked. Departures occur without farewell. The building remains unchanged by who passed through it. It does not accumulate stories. It sheds them. Over time, these places outlast many of the people who use them. Even when authority weakens, the stations often continue in reduced form, repurposed, adapted, absorbed into new routines. Their original intention lingers in the layout. Pause here, then move on. In this sense, the waystation is a quiet lesson in Roman thinking. Stability is achieved not by inspiring loyalty, but by organizing necessity. Comfort is permitted only where it does not interfere. Rest is allowed only where it enables continuation. Nothing here invites you to stay. Everything encourages you to leave. As night settles again and another traveler arrives, the building performs its role without recognition. It offers water. It offers shelter. It offers just enough rest. Then it waits to release the weight it briefly carried. The road continues, the system holds, and nothing remarkable occurs, which is precisely the point. Roadside inns after dark. Beyond the official stations lie roadside inns known not for comfort but for tolerance, places that exist in the margins of planning, tolerated rather than celebrated, permitted because reality has a habit of exceeding schedules. These inns are not part of the imperial system, yet they persist alongside it. like unofficial annotations written into the landscape by necessity. They appear where travelers grow tired of calculation and require something less regulated, something that acknowledges the body more than the timetable. The Roman roadside inn, often called the Capona, offers warmth without promise. The fire burns because fire is useful, not because it is welcoming. Food is provided without refinement, prepared to satisfy hunger rather than expectation. Bread is dense. Stew is familiar in the way repetition becomes familiar. Wine is poured because thirst interrupts travel, not because anyone intends to linger. Beds exist because bodies eventually refuse to remain upright, and these beds remember too many bodies to bother pretending otherwise. At night, the Capona settles into its most honest state. Daylight encourages conversation, bargaining, mild optimism. Darkness removes these habits. Travelers eat quietly. They do not discuss where they have been or where they are going unless required. Laughter appears briefly, usually accidental, then dissolves once it realizes no one is prepared to receive it. No one expects excellence here. Excellence would feel suspicious, like an invitation to disappointment. The structure itself communicates low expectations efficiently. Walls are uneven, floors announce footsteps. The air holds layers of smoke and old meals. Nothing suggests improvement is forthcoming. This is not neglect. It is accuracy. The Capona reflects what happens when movement exceeds infrastructure, and humans fill the gap with improvised solutions that function well enough to continue. These places exist because humans require pause even when empires prefer momentum. The Roman state plans rest with precision, but reality is untidy. Schedules slip. Animals tire earlier than expected. Storms intervene. Paperwork miscalculates. The Capona absorbs these irregularities quietly, providing unsanctioned relief without demanding acknowledgement. It is the empire's unofficial safety valve, never praised, rarely trusted, but consistently used. At night, the innkeeper becomes less a host and more a caretaker of inertia. He keeps the fire alive. He pours drinks without enthusiasm. He does not ask questions that would invite stories. His goal is not hospitality but flow. Guests arrive tired. Guests leave less tired. That is the extent of the transaction. Anything beyond that would complicate matters unnecessarily. The mild irony is that these unremarkable spaces often feel more human than the official stations. Not kinder, but more forgiving. The Capona does not care if you arrive late or early. It does not verify credentials. It does not measure your importance. It offers the same bench to everyone and trusts hunger to equalize expectations. This indifference can feel comforting after days of calculated efficiency. Sleep here is uneven. Beds creak. Blankets carry the faint weight of previous occupants. Privacy is assumed rather than enforced. Dreams are interrupted by movement, by sound, by the realization that morning will arrive regardless of preparation. Yet this imperfect rest is often enough to restore motion, enough to continue. Conversation remains minimal. Travelers sense instinctively that words are unnecessary. Silence allows fatigue to settle without interpretation. Occasionally someone speaks, but the words drift into the room and dissipate without consequence. No one repeats them. No one builds upon them. The night does not encourage narrative here. The Capona does not pretend to be part of something larger. It does not reference the empire. It does not frame itself as essential. It simply exists, quietly adjusting to demand. This humility is perhaps its greatest strength. While monuments rely on memory, the inn relies on need. and need is far more reliable. As darkness deepens, the inn's role becomes clearer. It is not a refuge from the road, but an extension of it. The road brings bodies. The inn allows them to pause without commitment. Then the road takes them again. The transition is smooth, precisely because nothing meaningful occurs in between. There is gentle humor in the way these places resist improvement. One could imagine an ambitious owner attempting refinement, better food, cleaner rooms, softer beds. Such efforts would attract attention. Attention would attract expectations, and expectations would invite disappointment. The Kaupona avoids this trap by remaining stubbornly adequate. Adequacy is sustainable. In the quiet hours, the building listens more than it speaks. Wind passes through cracks, fire settles into embers. Breathing replaces conversation. Time slows, not because it is honored, but because nothing urges it forward, aggressively. This is rest without ceremony, pause without permission. When morning approaches, the inn does not announce it. Travelers wake gradually, stiff but functional. Payment is exchanged without gratitude. Departure occurs without farewell. The Kaupona does not remember who stayed, and no one remembers it with affection. This mutual forgetfulness is a form of agreement. Over generations, many of these inns will vanish, absorbed into other structures, repurposed, or simply abandoned. Yet their logic persists. Wherever movement exceeds planning, such places reappear. They are not Roman because of architecture or law, but because of necessity managed quietly. In the end, roadside inns after dark reveal a truth the empire rarely articulates. Systems rely not only on order but on tolerated disorder. Progress requires pauses that do not ask permission. The Kaupona does not challenge momentum. It makes momentum possible by allowing humans to remain human briefly, then move on again without comment. The sound of wheels on stone. The dominant sound of the Roman night is not silence. It is repetition, steady and unambitious, a rhythm that does not seek attention yet refuses to disappear. Long after voices retreat and lamps dim, the road continues to speak in its own restrained language. Wheels meet stone, stone answers wheels, and the exchange repeats with a patience that suggests this conversation has been happening for longer than anyone present can remember. Cartwheels strike the paving at intervals that feel almost measured, not by intention, but by inevitability. The sound is dull, controlled, and oddly reassuring. This is not music, though it has tempo. It is function rendered audible, labor translated into vibration. Each impact confirms that movement is occurring as expected. Nothing is improvising. Nothing is celebrating. Everything is proceeding. At night, this sound travels farther. Without daytime noise to compete, the rhythm spreads across open ground, bouncing gently from embankments and walls before dissolving into distance. It does not demand listening, yet it is difficult to ignore. The sound carries with it a promise that something is still happening somewhere else, even if that something is merely another cart moving toward a place that will also not be remembered. Merchants prefer these hours. Before dawn, before markets open, before negotiations begin, goods move with fewer interruptions. Grain travels without commentary. Tools shift locations without attracting curiosity. Supplies approach cities quietly, entering their outskirts like thoughts that arrive before full awareness. The road does not judge cargo. It does not distinguish between necessity and ambition. It accepts weight equally and responds only with sound. Stone, in this exchange, is impressively impartial. It does not soften for valuable loads or resist trivial ones. Grain, tools, letters, and objects without names all produce the same dull report as they pass. For a brief moment, each becomes sound. Then the sound fades, and the object continues toward its destination, relieved of the obligation to be noticed. This repetition shapes the night itself. Time seems to stretch not because nothing happens, but because the same thing happens again and again without escalation. The mind, encountering no variation, begins to relax its grip. Attention loosens. The sound becomes background, then texture, then something closer to atmosphere. It does not disappear, but it no longer insists on interpretation. There is a quiet irony in how much effort goes into producing such an unremarkable noise. Trees were cut, stones were quarried, roads were engineered with precision so that wheels could roll smoothly enough to create this predictable rhythm. An empire organizes resources so that at night nothing sounds urgent. The result is a landscape where boredom is audible and boredom functions efficiently. Drivers do not comment on the sound, they expect it. When it changes, they notice immediately. A crack in stone, a loose fitting, a wheel that needs attention. Silence would be alarming. Silence would suggest interruption. As long as the rhythm continues, all is well enough to proceed. Animals respond to this sound as well. Horses adjust their gait instinctively, settling into patterns learned through repetition. They understand, without instruction, how far they can go before rest becomes necessary. The sound of wheels confirms pace. It reassures them that the load remains consistent, that the road is behaving as expected. At night, without visual distractions, the relationship between movement and sound becomes intimate. Each vibration travels up through the cart into the driver's body, reminding him that progress is measurable even when unseen. Distance becomes something felt rather than observed. The road communicates through pressure rather than scenery. There is no hierarchy in this soundscape. A wealthy merchant's cargo produces no grander noise than a modest farmer's supplies. Letters announcing administrative adjustments strike stone with the same indifference as sacks of grain. The road refuses to amplify importance. Everything is reduced to weight and motion, and both are treated fairly. As the night deepens, the repetition becomes almost meditative. The mind, deprived of novelty, begins to drift. Thoughts slow, concerns flatten. The sound does not invite reflection, but it allows it to fade. In this way, the road offers a kind of unintended comfort. It suggests that the world can continue without requiring constant attention. The humor here is subtle. Rome, known for spectacle, allows its most essential processes to announce themselves with the least impressive noise imaginable. No fanfare accompanies supply chains. No applause follows successful delivery. The sound of wheels on stone is enough. Anything more would be unnecessary. Occasionally the rhythm pauses. A cart stops. An animal shifts. The absence is brief, noticeable, and slightly unsettling. Then movement resumes and the sound returns, restoring balance. The interruption is forgotten quickly, absorbed into the larger pattern of continuation. By the time dawn approaches, the night has already accomplished its work. Goods are closer to their destinations. Cities will wake to find supplies waiting. Markets will open as if by habit, unaware that the sound of wheels carried their future hours earlier through darkness. In the end, this sound defines the Roman night more accurately than silence ever could. It is the noise of systems functioning without drama, of labor proceeding without commentary. Wheels strike stone, stone answers back. And the empire for another night continues to exist at a manageable volume. Travelers without narrative. Most who walk these roads do not imagine themselves as historical, not because they lack imagination, but because history has never shown interest in consulting them. They move through space with the quiet assumption that nothing they do will be remembered beyond the next milestone. This assumption is not depressing. It is practical. It allows movement without the burden of significance, which would otherwise slow the legs and clutter the mind. In the 3rd century AD, the road is populated not by heroes but by roles. Soldiers transfer posts without ceremony, adjusting armor straps more from habit than anticipation. Traders count inventory repeatedly, not out of obsession but because counting reassures them that the numbers have not changed while they were distracted by distance. Officials travel with documents, tucked away carefully, not because the papers are inspiring, but because misplacing them would require explanation. None of these people believe they are participating in something worth narrating. They believe they are late, early, or on time. They do not seek meaning. They seek arrival. Meaning suggests reflection, and reflection suggests pause. Pause suggests inefficiency. The road has trained them gently but firmly to value predictability over interpretation. When a destination appears exactly where expected, satisfaction is quiet and brief. When it appears late, irritation replaces curiosity. No one wonders what this delay symbolizes. They wonder how long it will last. The road rewards those who do not ask questions. It offers predictability to those who respect its purpose. This is not generosity. It is consistency. The road does not punish curiosity, but it does not accommodate it either. Those who linger mentally tend to linger physically, and the road has little patience for both. It prefers travelers who understand that momentum is its only real language. At night, this absence of narrative becomes more pronounced. Without daylight to frame movement as progress, travel feels suspended between points that refuse interpretation. Steps repeat, distances shrink. The traveler becomes a unit of motion rather than a story in progress. This reduction is oddly calming. Without a narrative to maintain, the mind rests even as the body continues. Soldiers moving between assignments do not reflect on strategy. That has already been decided elsewhere. Their concern is footwear, weather, and the location of the next sanctioned pause. Rank matters less on the road than endurance. An officer limping is simply slower. A private with steady pace is simply reliable. The road acknowledges neither distinction nor ambition. Traders measure their success not in adventure but in intact goods. A journey without incident is the best possible outcome. If nothing happens, profit remains unthreatened. They do not romanticize distance. Distance is a cost to be managed. At night, they listen for familiar sounds that confirm motion continues as expected. Wheels on stone, hooves maintaining rhythm. The absence of disruption is reassuring. Officials carry authority lightly here. Documents do not glow in the dark. Seals do not demand attention. At night, authority feels administrative rather than impressive. The official becomes another traveler with a reason to arrive, rather than a story to tell. This reduction suits the system well. Authority functions best when it does not need to announce itself. There is mild irony in how much future commentary depends on these unremarkable journeys. Decisions that alter taxes, redirect resources, or inconvenience entire communities move quietly through the night in the hands of people who do not care what they contain. Narrative will be applied later by others who were not present. The travelers themselves remain uninterested. The road enforces this indifference gently. It offers no scenery worth describing at night. Hills flatten into silhouettes, fields dissolve into texture. Without visual prompts, imagination rests. The traveler is left with movement and the promise that stopping prematurely would complicate matters. This simplicity is efficient and therefore encouraged. Conversation among travelers remains minimal. Shared silence is easier than shared reflection. Words invite interpretation, and interpretation invites disagreement. The road prefers agreement, even if it is implicit and unexamined. When speech does occur, it is practical. Distances, directions, weather, nothing that would require memory. Over time, this routine erodes any lingering sense of personal drama. The traveler adjusts expectations downward until satisfaction becomes achievable again. Arrival is enough. Completion is sufficient. No one expects transformation. The road does not promise it. There is humor in how thoroughly this lack of narrative supports continuity. Empires do not survive on inspiration alone. They survive because most people involved believe their role is small enough not to require explanation. This belief keeps systems moving smoothly through nights that would otherwise invite reflection. As dawn approaches, travelers feel no urge to summarize their experience. There is nothing to summarize. The journey occurred. Progress was made. Fatigue was managed. That is all. Memory retains fragments, but none demand preservation. The road has done its work by allowing people to pass without becoming stories. In the end, travelers without narrative embody the most sustainable form of participation. They do not resist the system. They do not glorify it. They move through it quietly, allowing it to function without interruption. The road remains. Movement continues. History is written elsewhere by those who arrive after the work has already been done. Night and authority. At night, authority becomes procedural, shedding the gestures it uses during daylight to remind people that it exists. There are no parades moving slowly through streets, no speeches shaped for applause, no raised voices practicing importance. What remains is quieter and therefore more effective. Documents move between offices. Seals are checked. Instructions pass from hand to hand with minimal ceremony. The empire does not perform itself while the city sleeps. It manages itself. In the 3rd century AD, this is how power prefers to operate. Public authority requires visibility, but functional authority prefers darkness. In darkness, attention relaxes. Resistance sleeps. Habit takes over. The empire governs itself while asleep not because it is careless, but because it is confident enough to trust its own mechanisms. Instructions cross provinces without announcement. Reports return quietly, folded, stacked, and absorbed into systems that do not pause to admire them. Power here is administrative, boring, durable, exactly as intended. It does not demand belief. It requires compliance, which is far easier to obtain when no one is being asked to notice anything remarkable. At night, authority does not argue for legitimacy. It assumes it. The assumption holds because nothing contradicts it loudly enough to matter. The spaces where this authority operates are deliberately uninteresting. Offices lit by single lamps, corridors that echo just enough to discourage lingering, tables scarred by repetition rather than history. Clerks work with movements learned through routine. They copy, they seal, they record. Their labor is repetitive and therefore trusted. Originality would be suspicious. Accuracy is sufficient. Night removes the temptation to dramatize decisions. Without an audience, policy becomes paperwork. Orders are stripped of rhetoric and reduced to instruction. This reduction is not a loss. It is efficiency. The empire understands that most power does not need to be seen to function. In fact, being seen too often invites questions, and questions slow process. There is mild irony in how much effort is invested in making authority feel effortless. Systems are built so that no one individual appears responsible for movement. Responsibility diffuses across desks, routes, and schedules. By the time an instruction arrives, its origin has become abstract. Authority feels less like a command and more like a condition. At night, this abstraction deepens. Messengers arrive without fanfare. Documents are received without comment. No one applauds the arrival of information. It is expected. Expectation replaces excitement, and expectation is easier to maintain indefinitely. The empire runs on this quiet confidence. Those who serve within these structures understand their role clearly. They are not expected to interpret meaning, only to preserve continuity. Judgment is minimized. Procedure dominates. If something is unclear, it is set aside rather than debated. Debate requires energy and witnesses. Night offers neither generously. Even enforcement changes character after dark. Guards do not posture. They observe. Their presence is subtle, their movements economical. Authority is not projected outward aggressively. It is held in reserve, ready but unexercised. This restraint reinforces stability. Power that does not need to act constantly appears more reliable. The administrative night is also a time of correction. Errors discovered during the day are adjusted quietly. Numbers are recalculated, records amended. These corrections do not announce themselves. They simply prevent future inconvenience. In this way, night becomes the empire's preferred moment for maintenance, when flaws can be addressed without embarrassment. There is humor in how unimpressive this version of power appears. An empire capable of mobilizing armies depends at night on people who move paper carefully and avoid mistakes. The grand narratives celebrated later rely on these hours of deliberate dullness. Without them, spectacle would collapse under its own weight. Night also equalizes authority in subtle ways. Titles matter less when offices are quiet. Rank is visible on documents rather than in posture. The darkness flattens hierarchy into function. Everyone present is there for the same reason. Keep things moving. Do not draw attention. As dawn approaches, the work of night authority begins to disappear into routine. Instructions issued quietly now feel inevitable. Reports received earlier are referenced casually. Decisions made without witnesses are treated as if they had always been obvious. This invisibility is success. Power that integrates seamlessly into daily life no longer needs explanation. The population wakes unaware that anything occurred. Markets open, roads fill, voices rise. Authority resumes its daytime posture, prepared to be seen again if necessary, but its most important work has already been done while attention was elsewhere. In this sense, the empire's greatest strength is not its ability to command loudly, but its ability to continue quietly. Night reveals this preference clearly. Authority here does not insist on being admired. It insists on being effective. And effectiveness, unlike admiration, can be sustained without interruption. So while the city sleeps, power circulates like a low current, unnoticed but present. Documents move, decisions settle, continuity is preserved. Nothing dramatic occurs, and that is precisely why the system endures. Weather and indifference. Rain changes sound but not direction. When it falls on the Roman road, it does not arrive with drama or intention. It simply lands, settles, and alters texture. Stone becomes darker. Dust releases its grip reluctantly. The rhythm of movement continues with slight adjustment. Wheels do not stop because water falls from the sky. Feet do not reconsider destination. Weather is acknowledged only to the extent that it interferes, and even then, only briefly. Dust clings with equal persistence. It gathers on hems, on sandals, on the edges of carts, embedding itself into travel until it becomes indistinguishable from effort itself. No one complains aloud. Complaints do not remove dust. They merely announce discomfort without remedy. The road offers no response. It accepts dust as part of its working environment, just as it accepts weight, pressure, and repetition. Dust is not an obstacle. It is a condition. Cold stiffens fingers gradually, not as an attack, but as a reminder. Metal contracts, leather tightens. Breath becomes visible, then uninteresting. Travelers adjust their grip. They do not stop. Cold is managed through movement, not resistance. The road does not insulate. It does not protect. It simply continues to exist at the same angle, the same width, the same expectation. Heat behaves differently, but with similar disregard. Long after sunset, warmth lingers in stone, released slowly, unevenly, like a debt being repaid without enthusiasm. The road remembers the day longer than bodies do. Travelers feel the contrast beneath their feet, warmth below, cooling air above. The sensation passes without commentary. Heat does not persuade the road to soften. It only delays discomfort until later. The road remains indifferent. This indifference is not cruelty, it is design. The Roman road does not accommodate comfort because comfort interferes with consistency. Accommodation requires attention. Attention invites preference. Preference complicates systems that depend on repetition. Indifference, on the other hand, scales well. It applies equally in rain, dust, cold, and heat without modification. Those who travel these roads understand this implicitly. Weather is not an event. It is background. They dress accordingly when possible, adjust pace when necessary, and continue regardless. The road has taught them not to expect assistance. Expectation is an emotional luxury that movement cannot afford. There is quiet irony in how thoroughly the empire prepares infrastructure while leaving weather unaddressed. Roads are engineered, stations are placed, schedules are calculated. Rain is allowed to fall wherever it pleases. Heat is permitted to linger. Cold is endured. The system assumes that adaptation is the responsibility of the traveler, not the road. This assumption holds because it must. At night, weather feels closer. Rain sounds louder. Cold feels sharper. Heat seems to radiate upward with intent. Yet the road's response remains unchanged. Its surface does not shift to accommodate discomfort. Its alignment does not alter to avoid exposure. The road enforces continuation not by command, but by refusing to offer alternatives. Sound changes more than structure. Rain softens impact. Wheels strike stone with a muted insistence. Footsteps lose their crispness. The night absorbs these variations without interest. Direction remains fixed. Progress continues at slightly adjusted speeds. Nothing suggests stopping would improve the situation. Dust behaves differently at night. It settles more readily, no longer stirred by constant movement. It coats surfaces evenly, creating a quiet uniformity. Travelers notice it only when it enters eyes or mouth, prompting brief irritation before attention returns to movement. Dust does not inspire reflection. It encourages blinking and continuation. Cold encourages efficiency. Movements become economical. Speech shortens. Stops are minimized. The road does not respond, but the traveler adapts, becoming more aligned with the road's expectations. This alignment feels practical rather than heroic. There is no sense of overcoming adversity, only of managing it quietly. Heat tests patience differently. It slows pace without offering rest. It lingers when movement stops, punishing hesitation. The road does not offer shade intentionally. Shade appears incidentally, accepted briefly, then left behind. Heat teaches the traveler that stopping does not always bring relief. Sometimes movement is the least uncomfortable option. There is subtle humor in how weather reduces human urgency to something manageable. Rain dampens confidence. Cold humbles pride. Heat dissolves ambition. The road observes none of this. It remains unchanged, its purpose intact. The traveler, not the infrastructure, absorbs the lesson. Over time, repeated exposure to weather erodes the desire for complaint. What cannot be negotiated becomes normalized. The traveler stops asking whether conditions are fair. Fairness implies consideration. Weather offers none. The road mirrors this indifference, reinforcing the idea that continuation does not require comfort. At night, when reflection might otherwise emerge, weather redirects attention to the immediate. Fingers numb, clothing dampens, breathing adjusts. These sensations anchor the traveler in the present without inviting analysis. Thought becomes shallow, practical, focused on arrival. This narrowing of attention suits the road well. The Roman road does not promise ease. It promises predictability. Weather may alter experience, but it does not alter expectation. Movement remains possible. Direction remains clear. This consistency is enough to sustain travel across seasons without renegotiation. As dawn approaches, weather often feels less significant. The body warms through motion. Light reframes discomfort as temporary. The road continues to do nothing remarkable. It enforces continuation simply by existing unchanged. In this way, weather and road collaborate unintentionally. One introduces variation, the other refuses to respond. The result is a system that continues, regardless of conditions. Comfort is optional, progress is not. And the empire, indifferent and enduring, moves forward without asking the sky for permission. The Appian Way as habit. Among all Roman roads, the Appian Way remains the clearest expression of Roman thinking, not because it is famous, but because it is habitual. It does not introduce itself. It does not invite interpretation. It proceeds forward with the quiet confidence of something that expects to be used rather than admired. Straight, unapologetic, still useful, it represents an idea repeated until it becomes ordinary, and ordinary until it becomes invisible. The Appian Way was never meant to surprise anyone. From its earliest stones, its purpose was clarity rather than beauty. Direction mattered more than experience. Efficiency mattered more than comfort. By the 3rd century AD, its fame is already old, worn smooth by centuries of feet and wheels that no longer care about its origins. What remains is habit, and habit is far more durable than intention. At night, the Appian Way feels less monumental and more honest. Without daylight to frame it as achievement, it becomes what it has always been beneath reputation: a surface, a direction, a decision enforced repeatedly. Milestones fade into silhouettes. Tombs along the road recede into darkness. The road itself does not disappear, it simplifies. What cannot be seen does not compete for attention. What remains is alignment. This alignment is the heart of Roman thinking. Choose a direction. Commit to it. Maintain it long enough that alternatives feel unnecessary. The Appian Way does not ask whether it could have curved more gently. It does not regret passing through inconvenient terrain. It assumes its original judgment was sufficient, and history has rewarded that assumption by continuing to use it. Travelers at night experience this clarity as relief. There is no need to decide where to go. The road has already decided. Choice is removed, and with it the burden of doubt. Movement becomes mechanical, almost restful. The body follows the stone. The mind follows the body. Progress happens without negotiation. There is mild irony in how this confidence eventually becomes comforting. What began as control matures into reassurance. The road does not change its mind, and in a world where many things do, this reliability feels generous. The Appian Way does not promise improvement. It promises consistency, which is often preferable. At night, the road does not perform its history. It does not remind travelers of consuls, legions, or victories. Those narratives belong to daylight. Darkness strips away symbolic weight, leaving only function. Wheels roll. Feet strike stone. Distance shortens quietly. The road is uninterested in being remembered correctly. It is satisfied with being used. This lack of ambition is part of its strength. The Appian Way does not attempt to adapt to changing fashions. It does not soften its edges to appear modern. It remains as it is, trusting that usefulness will outlast novelty. This trust has proven effective. Empires shift. Priorities change. The road remains passable. Habit is often misunderstood as laziness, but here, it is discipline sustained over generations. Maintenance replaces inspiration. Repair replaces redesign. Each stone returned to place affirms commitment to the original decision. The road is not improved because improvement would suggest doubt. Doubt would undermine confidence. Confidence, once embedded in infrastructure, is expensive to question. At night, this confidence feels almost intimate. Without crowds, the traveler senses the scale of repetition that created this surface. Countless footsteps, countless wheels, all choosing the same line. The realization is not dramatic. It settles quietly, like understanding that arrives without urgency. The Appian Way does not rush travelers. It does not encourage speed beyond what is practical. Its straightness allows momentum, but it does not demand it. Those who move slowly still move forward. Those who pause briefly are not punished. The road's patience matches its firmness. There is subtle humor in how unimpressed the road remains by its own reputation. Monuments nearby celebrate themselves loudly. The road remains silent. It does not need inscription. Its existence is its argument. Use confirms value. Continued use confirms success. Night amplifies this humility. Without visual cues to elevate it, the road becomes nearly abstract. A line through darkness, a texture beneath feet, direction embodied. It feels less like an artifact and more like an agreement still being honored. Travelers rarely think of the Appian Way as an idea. They experience it as convenience, as inevitability, as something that works. This practical relationship is exactly what the road requires. Admiration would slow traffic. Habit keeps it clear. The road does not care who travels upon it. Merchants, officials, soldiers, messengers, all reduced to movement. Titles flatten into pace. The stone does not adjust for importance. It responds only to pressure. This indifference feels fair in its consistency. Over time, the Appian Way teaches a lesson without announcing it. Endurance does not require drama. Straight lines do not need justification once proven effective. Continuation is often more powerful than reinvention. As the night deepens, the road holds its shape. It absorbs sound. It reflects little. It waits without waiting. Travelers pass unaware that they are reinforcing a habit centuries old simply by moving forward. By dawn, the road will look monumental again. Light will restore its reputation. But at night, it is simply itself. Useful, unimpressed, continuing. And in that continuation, without explanation or apology, the Appian Way reveals the quiet Roman belief that the best ideas do not announce themselves. They persist. The quiet logic of movement. Movement here is not dramatic. It is expected. The Roman road does not frame motion as an achievement, and those who travel upon it do not behave as if arrival deserves recognition. To arrive is merely to complete what was already assumed would happen. To depart is equally unremarkable. No one applauds the moment a traveler reaches a destination. No one mourns when another figure diminishes into distance. Movement is not emotional currency. It is routine. This logic settles most clearly at night, when the absence of witnesses strips travel of performance. Without crowds, movement loses its potential audience. A traveler becomes a function again, a body in transit fulfilling an obligation that neither begins nor ends with them. The road has no interest in individual stories. It does not pause to accommodate reflection. It supports systems rather than memories, and systems depend on repetition rather than meaning. In the 3rd century AD, this understanding is widespread, though rarely articulated. People move because movement is required. Orders must arrive. Goods must be delivered. Positions must be filled. The road does not inspire these actions. It facilitates them quietly, offering predictability in place of narrative. Those who accept this bargain travel with less frustration. Those who resist it tend to tire more quickly. Arrival, when it occurs, feels anticlimactic by design. The traveler steps off the road into another routine. There is no threshold moment where motion transforms into significance. The destination absorbs the traveler without ceremony. Responsibilities resume. The road releases its hold without comment. Completion is silent because silence allows continuity. Departure follows the same pattern in reverse. No speeches mark the leaving. No ritual confirms importance. A figure recedes and the road remains unchanged. This lack of acknowledgement is not cruelty. It is efficiency. Systems function best when transitions require no emotional processing. The road's indifference to individual stories creates a strange kind of fairness. No traveler is privileged by attention. No journey is elevated by sentiment. Everyone is treated as temporary, which, paradoxically, allows the system to endure longer than any individual involved. The road is patient because it does not invest emotionally. At night, this patience becomes almost tangible. Movement continues at reduced volume. Wheels turn, feet strike stone. The rhythm remains steady, uninterested in who participates. The sound carries briefly, then dissolves. What persists is not the traveler, but the pattern. There is mild irony in how much human effort goes into sustaining something that refuses to care. Roads are repaired, stations maintained, rules enforced. Also, movement can proceed without commentary. The empire invests in infrastructure that deliberately avoids creating meaning. Meaning complicates process. Process, when unburdened, lasts longer. Those who travel these roads learn quickly that reflection is optional and often discouraged. The road offers no scenery worth pausing over at night. Darkness flattens landmarks. Distance becomes abstract. The traveler's focus narrows to pace and direction. This narrowing is restful. It reduces the world to manageable dimensions. Systems prefer this reduction. When individuals think less about why they move and more about how, efficiency improves. The road teaches this lesson gently, not through instruction, but through design. There are no forks demanding decision. No decorative elements inviting pause. Everything suggests continuation. Memory in this environment becomes unnecessary. The road does not require recollection to function. Yesterday's traveler does not inform today's movement. Each journey is self-contained, yet indistinguishable from the last. This interchangeability is not dehumanizing. It is stabilizing. At night, travelers sense this interchangeability more clearly. Without visual cues to differentiate one body from another, movement becomes anonymous. Identity fades into function. This anonymity relieves pressure. Without a story to maintain, the traveler can simply move. There is subtle humor in how anticlimactic this makes history. Later generations will search for turning points and dramatic transitions, but the road reveals a different truth. Change occurs through accumulation, not spectacle. Movement repeated enough times alters systems without announcing itself. The road does not resist memory, but it does not support it either. Memories belong to people. Roads belong to use. This separation allows both to exist without interfering with each other. Individuals remember what matters to them. The road remains focused on what matters to continuation. As dawn approaches, movement becomes more visible again. Travelers regain shape and context. Stories will be told later, selectively, often inaccurately. But during the night, the quiet logic holds. Movement occurs because it must, not because it means something. This logic governs more than travel. It reflects a broader Roman preference for processes that function without emotional reinforcement. The empire survives not because people believe in it passionately every day, but because they participate in it habitually. Roads are the physical expression of this habit. The absence of applause at arrival and the absence of grief at departure protect the system from fatigue. Emotional highs and lows are expensive to sustain. Routine is cheaper. The road enforces routine by refusing to engage with feeling. At night, when fatigue could invite reflection, the road counters with repetition. Step follows step, wheel follows wheel. Thought slows. The body continues. This continuation feels inevitable rather than forced, which is precisely the effect the system requires. There is no final destination implied by this movement. Journeys end, but movement does not. The road does not suggest progress toward a conclusion. It supports circulation, not resolution. This open-endedness prevents disappointment. Nothing is promised beyond arrival. In the end, the quiet logic of movement reveals a truth that spectacle often obscures. Systems endure not by inspiring constant attention, but by operating below it. The Roman road embodies this principle perfectly. It does not ask to be remembered, it asks to be used. And night after night, with no witnesses to applaud or object, movement continues. When stone outlasted intent. In the 3rd century AD, Rome does not collapse upon its roads. It steadies itself through them, quietly, almost without noticing. These nights are not preserved in memory because nothing exceptional insists on being recalled. Messages arrive where they are expected. Goods move closer to where they will be consumed. People rest only long enough to remain useful, then continue without ceremony. History later prefers moments of failure or triumph. But survival rarely announces itself. It simply repeats. The Roman road succeeds precisely because it avoids meaning. It does not attempt to inspire loyalty, devotion, or admiration. Inspiration fades quickly and demands renewal. The road chooses a more reliable role. It enables. It carries weight, direction, and habit with equal patience. It does not ask travelers what they believe, only whether they are moving. In this way, it supports a system that does not require constant confidence to function. Even doubt can travel efficiently. There is mild irony in how thoroughly this indifference proves effective. Empires invest heavily in symbols, yet rely quietly on structures that refuse symbolism altogether. When authority grows uncertain and ambition loses coherence, the road remains aligned. It does not reconsider its purpose. It does not await permission to continue. It simply exists in the same configuration it has always used, offering stability without reassurance. Long after Rome loses confidence in itself, the stones remain. Not because they represent something remembered fondly, but because they were placed to be used rather than admired. They endure as habits made solid, decisions repeated until repetition became permanence. At night, when meaning recedes and function remains, the road reveals its final lesson gently. Continuity does not require belief. It requires alignment.